Knicks coming out slow at the Garden last night and getting down early. I think it was 12-0. Coming off that West Coast trip, sometimes you see that in the NBA, but Karl Towns gets them going with that personal 15-0 run, and then they kind of take off in the third quarter and coast to an easy win, surprisingly easy win. Tim, what did you make of that game yesterday, kind of a seesaw early on?
I mean, honestly, it just sort of reinforced where the Heat have been for the past couple of months, right? I mean, going back to the trade deadline, they're now, I believe, 4-14 since trading Jimmy Butler, and obviously, a lot of that has been because of horrible fourth quarters. They came into last night's game getting outscored by 29 points per 100 possessions in the fourth quarter, which is just unfathomably bad. Obviously, the third quarter was 41-15 last night, but Knicks came back home. Karl had a great surge there to get them back in the game after falling behind early. And then, I thought it was mostly just about the Heat reverting back to who they've been rather than anything we really saw or learned about the Knicks.
Right. And Josh Hart, triple-double, tying Clyde Frazier for the franchise record single-season triple-doubles. I think he's now at 8. Got a couple weeks to overtake Clyde. I think he had a little message for Clyde in that process last night too. And Josh Hart, again, talking about seesaw, coming off a game where he really struggled against the Warriors, bounces back in a big way against Miami. I'm wondering for you, Troy, Josh, are you one of the people that would like to see Josh coming off the bench? Do you see him as a good cog in the starting five? Where are you at with Josh?
It's funny because Josh Hart, for me, was somebody initially starting off the season. You guys remember him saying, he doesn't know where he fits in the offense. And then he says that, and now he has a season that he has. So I think with Josh Hart and him being a starter right now, it obviously works because he does everything, all the little things that the starters don't do. When you have him on the bench, I can understand it during certain situations. You may want to put him on the bench. Maybe if you're going up against certain teams, certain lineups, if you want to, match certain lineups, maybe you do that. But I think for the most part, you've seen Josh Hart start the entire season, and I think good things have happened because of it. So it would surprise me heavily if he were to end up on the bench at some point in time, unless it's for a matchup situation in the postseason.
Tim, the shouting between Thibodeau and Hart in Golden State, cameras catch it. But you've been around this team, you've been around the league for a long time. Do we make too much of that, or is there more context needed? What are your thoughts there?
I mean, look, Tom and Josh are both wired in similar ways. I didn't really make much of it at all. Obviously it's been a long couple of weeks for the Knicks. Jalen Brunson gets hurt. They lose a couple of close games. You had the whole Mikal Bridges minutes thing. I think it's ultimately just much ado about nothing. And when you're in a situation like we are in the Eastern Conference as a whole, where there's really nothing to talk about for the next 4 to 6 weeks, really, until at minimum when the playoffs start, we're just going to be finding stuff to talk about. And I think this thing is just the latest example of that. And there's probably going to be several more between now and late April.
And let's hope so, because we need some topics here to get us through to the into the regular season. It's speaking of that game last night. Obviously, Towns goes on that 15-0 heater. And it's interesting because you're seeing now more of Towns and Mitchell Robinson on the floor together. Knicks are obviously taking a look at that. 19 minutes, I believe, so far. The defense has been very strong. It's a small sample size, obviously, Troy, but what do you see from that lineup? Do you like it? Do you want to see more?
It is phenomenal, Ian. Last night, I think we saw them play, like you said, the most minutes together that they played in the fourth quarter. And you think to yourself, why is he playing them in the fourth quarter? And I'm part of the minutes police, by the way, so I can say this. Why is, we're up, 20 points, 24 points. Why are they in? But then you realize they're in there because they need to gain chemistry. They need to understand how to play with each other. Mitchell Robinson has been out the entire season. And Robinson by himself had a very good game, probably his best game back as a Knick last night against the Heat. He was blocking shots. He was getting rebounds. He was actually putting the ball on the floor in the paint and making a shot inside the paint. This Mitchell Robinson has not been seen before. If he can get it together, gain that chemistry and the trust, which Towns mentioned at the after the game as being a big factor for these guys. If they can get that together, they are going to be a dominant duo come the postseason. And I'm not saying it's something that could potentially start, but if it's something you can go to late in game to close out for that defense, you have Karl Towns inside, then you have Mitchell Robinson able to go out to the perimeter, it changes the Knicks defensively. And I think the numbers speak for that as well, too.
Yeah, Mitchell Robinson was in good spirits last night after the game, just joking around with Mikal Bridges and others. They were having a good time. So it's good to see the big man back and happy again after dealing with so many injuries, particularly this last one that dragged on. And Tim, looking at the defensive numbers recently, they've been very strong. The last 5 games before that Heat game, Knicks were number 3 defensive rating, and it coincides with Robinson, coincides with Jalen Brunson being out. You see stuff that is sustainable even when Brunson returns from this defense that, the Knicks can look to and fans can look for?
I mean, yes and no. I mean, I certainly think Mitchell Robinson will help them a little bit. Being able to play him and Karl Towns together some will help. But, respectfully, Mitchell Robinson is not going to play that many minutes, and he's not Rudy Gobert. Like, he's a nice player, and he's a good offensive rebounder. But, I don't think he's going to resolve the Knicks' issues. And certainly when the Knicks are playing the Boston Celtics in the second round, the team they've gotten drilled by 3 times this year, I don't think Mitchell Robinson helps them at all against the Celtics. So, yes, he's a useful player. He gives them more depth. He gives them more size. He gives them a different dimension. But I've thought the whole season that he doesn't really change the Knicks' ceiling or the Knicks' path, because I just don't think you can play him much with Karl Towns anyway. And this has been a nice stretch that they've played, but I just don't ultimately think it's going to have a huge bearing on how the rest of their season goes.
Right. And I guess a bigger picture question, Tim, before we get to a rare Jim Dolan interview is, what is the path right now? I mean, is it second round and out and then add around the margins? Because obviously they want to win a title badly here. They want to be a championship contender. Doesn't seem like they're at that level right now. How do you see this shaking out this spring and then into the summer?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really see how the Knicks are going to get out of the second round. I mean, they're really locked into the 3. The Celtics are locked into the 2. And, I mean, look, I was at all 3 Knicks Celtics games this year. They got drilled in all 3 games, and they weren't as competitive as the final score indicated. And it's just a horrible matchup for the Knicks. And I don't – again, look, injuries could happen. We saw Indiana get to the conference finals last year in part because Giannis Antetokounmpo got hurt and half the Knicks got hurt, right? So certainly – there's a world where that kind of thing happens and maybe the Knicks find themselves in the conference finals. But I just think if you look at it right now, they might be the 5th best team in the league, 5th or 6th or 7th. Like, they're somewhere in that kind of range. The problem is either the best or second best team in the league is going to be waiting for them in the second round of the playoffs. And there's just no real way around that. And then when you look ahead to the summer, all right, well, what do the Knicks do? They don't really have a lot they can do. As you guys both know, they traded just about everything they had nailed down to get Karl Towns, to get Mikal Bridges. They put this team together with the thinking that, okay, we're going to have a 4 or 5 year window where this team could potentially be good enough to win. And then they might be right. I mean, the Celtics only have another year or 2 at max with this current group before they're going to have to start shedding some money to clear payroll and get their luxury tax bill down from the $500 million number they're looking at for next season. But we could also be looking at a situation where the Cleveland Cavaliers are just a younger, better version of the Knicks, potentially, at least, if this regular season means anything. So, none of that, I don't mean that to sound completely defeatist if you're a Knicks fan listening, thinking that there's absolutely no path for this team going forward, because I don't think that's the case. Like, I do think when you have an extended runway with a team in the current league with the financial restrictions that are coming online, you're going to have an opportunity or a few opportunities to break through. But, they are, I think, going to need either something to materially change with the roster or something to materially change with the teams around them, because, I do think they could beat the Cavs in a series, but I don't think they can beat the Celtics. And as of now, it's hard to see how the Knicks get better outside of other teams getting worse.